See you out there today. Welcome. I'm glad to have you joining with us today, and hope you enjoyed that opener video there, those last few lines. This is the insight that brings unity, empathy for your sister, oneness with your brother. My people discover me and one another. Thin places, consecrated ground, heaven on earth. Well, I hope you are glad to be here today. It's an exciting day here at Life Church, as it is every Sunday when we gather here digitally. It's always exciting. So I hope you are glad to be here with us today. My name is Jason. If we've never met before, I'm the pastor here at Life Church. And we have one hope, one objective, one kind of big idea each time we get together. Ultimately, we're just trying to help you, facilitate you having a meaningful connection and interaction with God. We're here to help people on the faith journey, no matter where you're at. So whether maybe you're just kind of getting started, maybe you're outside the whole faith and religious thing, and you're curious about it, and that's why you're here. Or maybe you've been in this thing for a long time, a part of this church, or just a part of faith and religion, and you're ready to learn some more. Or maybe your world's kind of fallen apart a little bit. Your faith world, and you're trying to pull the pieces back together in one way or another. Wherever you're at on the journey, we're glad that you're here, because Life Church is a safe place to explore and grow in faith. So we hope that happens for you today, and as you engage with this community of people, which is a fantastic community of people that is continuing to morph and grow here at Life Church. And so we're glad that you're here. So now that you're kind of settled and ready to go for the morning, if you haven't done it already, I want to invite you, just like I do every single Sunday we're together, to fill out our digital connection card. Now, your digital connection card can be found on your very own iPhone or smartphone, whatever phone you've got there. You just download our Life Church app, which you can find in any app store by searching Life Church Lancaster. Once you find that app, you can download that app. Right on the home screen, it says Digital Connection Card. And take a minute and fill that out. Let us know you're watching. This really is helpful to us, to let us know you're out there, to let us know who's engaging in this COVID, socially distanced world. It's really helpful and encouraging to know who's engaging with us out there and enjoying these services and finding them helpful. And so I encourage you to take a minute to fill out that digital connection card. Let us know that you're out there. And that's also a way you can ask some questions or let us know a few more things about yourself, and we'll reach out, follow up, and answer any questions you have. So take a minute and do that. We very much appreciate it. Also, just always want to say thank you to those of you who invest financially here at Life Church. Your financial gifts and donations are essential to helping us continue to be this kind of community in our community, this kind of church community in our broader Lancaster community at this time and place. And I believe that this church, Life Church, is desperately needed here in this community currently. There's no other church here in Lancaster County quite like us, and that's why I think God has us here. And so your financial investments and donations here go a long way in helping us continue to get the message out and to be a safe place for people to grow in faith. So thank you for investing here. And if you want to make a donation, you can go to our website. There's a lot of different ways you can give. You can give through texting by you can text to give. You can give through our app, which information's in the app. All the information there. You can mail a check. There's all kinds of ways to be able to give. And we thank you, whichever way you invest here. Thank you for that. I got two exciting things I want to talk to you about before we kind of kick into a little bit more singing and worship part of our morning together. The first thing is that we are planning our reopening. All right, this is exciting. March 7th, just a few weeks away now, we're going to reopen. And for those of you who were with us in November, it's going to be just like we did in November before COVID started to spike again. And so as numbers are coming down, we're working towards reopening in a safe way. And so there'll be face masks will be required. We'll be limiting the capacity in the auditorium to a 25% capacity. We have some disinfecting stations throughout the building. There will be no children's programming at this time. And there's one other thing. We're going to continue to offer the online stream. So if you're don't want to come and be here in person, don't worry, the online stream will continue to happen. But March 7th, for those of you who want to engage and be here physically, we invite you to engage with us starting March 7th, 10 a.m. Sunday mornings. And hopefully we'll stay open from here on out as a community and a culture and a nation. Hopefully we continue to get this virus under control. So that's that. So hope to see you March 7th. Now, one other thing that I sent an email out to some of you, and also it came out in the little notification that you get through the app if you have those turned on. But we have an exciting announcement today because some of you may know this. Hopefully most of you are aware that for the past several months, we have been on a search here as a church for someone to come in and lead the rowdy bunch that we call our Life Church band, someone to come in and serve as a part-time director of worship for us here at Life Church. And so we've been searching for this position to be filled for months and months now. We posted the role on several online job sites. I texted, emailed, Facebook messaged, direct message on Twitter, anyone and everyone that I could possibly think of who might have some connections or interest or connections with somebody who might be interested, just to get the word out. And after a bunch of interviews and a long process evaluation, I'm here to let you know that we're excited to let you know that we've offered this role to the very best candidate that we received, and she has gracefully accepted that offer. And so she will begin serving here at Life Church towards the end of March when she gets here, gets in town, gets settled in. And so I'm excited for our church community to get to know our new director of worship, who is Mrs. Amy Peck. And so Amy comes to us with a lot of musical expertise. She has a music degree. She has a wide variety of experience in church music and in performing. And she was by far our very best candidate, and I believe that she will serve our Life Church community extraordinarily well. And so we're excited to get her here and get started, and for her to meet you all and you to meet her. But the good news for today is that several weeks ago, as a part of a final step in our interview process with Amy, she came here. She did a rehearsal with our band, so thank you to the band members who were here that day. She did a rehearsal with the band, and at the close of that rehearsal, we recorded a bunch of the songs that they had worked on. And so today, for our music portion of our services this morning, you will be able to enjoy Amy leading our Life Church band in a few worship songs. And so we're excited to continue this process of introducing her to you. And so over the next couple of weeks, you'll hear a little more from Amy. You'll see a little bit more from Amy. Then ultimately, in March, she'll be here getting started. So anyway, without any further introduction, let's move on further into our service and listen to Amy as the band works together with her to lead us in a few songs.
I was wrong. storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness.
Well, wasn't that fantastic? So thank you to the band members who came in that weekend to record those songs with us. And in a couple of weeks, we'll share a few more of those songs that were recorded when Amy was here. But let's give Amy a big Life Church welcome. And remember that by the end of March, it's around the end of March when she'll be coming, and you'll be hearing more about that as those days draw near. And so. Today we are, it is Valentine's Day. I forgot that earlier. Happy Valentine's Day to all of you out there. But today we are jumping into our second week in this Restored Life teaching series. And the Restored Life teaching series is actually season 2 of a broader series that we're doing. We did season 1 at the start of the year called The Unmanageable Life. And now we're in season 2 called The Restored Life. And in these 2 seasons, we are working through the 12 steps that recovery movement has taught us, but they are 12 steps for spiritual transformation that work for anyone and everyone who's looking to grow in faith. And so we've been exploring those, and today we're going to continue that journey. But I want to start by mentioning there's a show on Apple TV called Ted Lasso. Now, I don't know if you've seen this show or not, but Ted Lasso. The show's about an American football coach who is Ted Lasso, who gets hired to coach a soccer team in London. The mastermind behind this unusual situation is Rebecca Welton. And she is the boss in the show. She's become the new owner of the soccer team. And after her bitter public divorce from her husband, who was cheating on her with a much younger woman. And so since the soccer team is her ex-husband's only true love, she decides that she wants to destroy the team and run it into the ground as an act of vengeance against her estranged husband. And that's why she hires Ted Lasso, the American football coach, to come to London and coach the elite Premier League soccer team. And yes, as you can imagine, it's pretty hilarious. And as the episodes progress, we find out that there's so much more to Ted Lasso than his relentless optimism and his witty one-liner coaching axioms. And we see his boss, Rebecca, working to undercut him at every turn because she needs the team to fail. This is the premise of the whole series. So, and addicted to her need for vengeance against her ex-husband, she steamrolls over anyone and everyone who gets in her way. Now, I need to tell you, before I go further here, there's a little bit of a mini spoiler alert. So if you're in the middle of watching Ted Lasso, or you're really hoping to watch Ted Lasso, I'm going to let a little bit of the cat out of the bag here, but not the whole thing. So plug your ears or mute the TV mute YouTube if you're concerned about that. But this will just take a second, because as the show progresses through a set of circumstances, Rebecca, or AKA boss, she slowly has a waking up experience, kind of like we've discussed through the 12-step program. She wakes up not to just what she's done, but also to who she's done it to, a person that she's actually growing to love and respect. And Lasso has become a friend, but it's a friendship that's stained by a lie. And until that lie is exposed, the relationship can't be real. So Rebecca knows that she must make amends. So in one of the most beautiful scenes, Rebecca walks in and tells Ed what she's done in detail. With tears in her eyes, she walks through all of her sins and offenses. And as Ted sits in disbelievement at being taken advantage of so deeply. And in that moment, her heart is completely in Ted Lasso's hands. And this is where we find ourselves on the path of spiritual transformation with steps 8 and 9. And it's so beautifully illustrated in this TV series, Ted Lasso. Now, I guess if you want to know what happens next, you'll have to watch Ted Lasso, because I'm not going to focus on Ted's response, because steps 8 and 9 have been beautifully demonstrated to us by the actions of his boss, Rebecca. And so we're not going to worry right now about his response. So I want you to take a look at steps 8 and 9 with me of the spiritual transformation journey of the 12 steps. Here's how they read. Step 8 says this: made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Does that make you shiver a little bit when you hear that? Right? These 12 steps are no joke. And then step 9 says this: made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, this is some really powerful stuff. These steps flip the script on our natural tendencies. You know, what is normal for us to do when there's offenses or breached relationships? What's normal for us is, if I was the one who was hurt, what's normal for me is I'll focus on what they did to me, right? I'll nurse my wounds. I'll focus on the damages that were done. I'll get my friends involved in my justifications and in my righteous indignation. And if I happen to be the one who's the offender in this, I'll focus on why the offended shouldn't be offended, right? Or why they misunderstood me, or why they're so sensitive, or why that's not really what I meant, or why the other person is so emotional or touchy or easily offended. We spend all of our energy avoiding the very thing that it is that we need to be doing, which is accepting our part in the interaction, taking responsibility for ourselves and our actions, and then making amends for it, just like Rebecca, Ted Lasso's boss, did in that scene. These two steps, steps 8 and 9, invite us to flip the natural script. And they can transform everything if we're willing to work the steps. But before we dive in, I want to acknowledge first that for many of us, admitting mistakes, admitting we were wrong, is going to be really hard, right? For some, it will be hard because of the nature of offenses that you've committed in your past. Maybe you stole from someone. You know you need to make it right. Did you feel nervous about it? Maybe you intentionally hurt someone. You were angry, and maybe it was physical, or maybe it was just emotional by saying mean and cutting things. And you're just not that excited about admitting that and stepping back into that. Maybe you maligned somebody's character. Maybe you purposely lied about someone. Maybe your irresponsible actions impacted someone in a life-altering way. And you feel really nervous about admitting these things out loud and talking to somebody about them. And maybe it was just simply a lapse of judgment in your part, and yet terrible damages were done because of something that you did. This can be weighty. This can be very serious, this step. So I want us all to just take a deep breath for a moment, right? We can do this. We can get through this together. So let's take a moment and breathe in, right? And breathe out. It's all right. Let your heart rate slow down a little bit. Breathe in and breathe out. Jesus, help us to hear what you want each of us to hear this morning. And help us to find the willingness to respond. Now, making amends is a huge theme in the teachings of Jesus and what it means to be a follower of Jesus. The 12 steps finds all of this teaching rooted deeply within Scripture and especially within Jesus' teaching. So I want to show you something that Jesus said where he talks about this. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 23, Jesus makes this comment. He says, "Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar," okay, he's saying if you're a person who's in the temple, right, in the Jewish system of worship, 2,000 years ago, they would come to the temple and they would offer a sacrifice at the altar. And so this was like a big moment. If he says, so if you are at the altar offering this sacrifice, and there, remember that your brother or sister has something against you, Jesus says, leave your gift there in front of the altar. Walk away from it. Just leave and go and first be reconciled to them and then come and offer your gift. Jesus says something really profoundly radical because he knows something about humans that we like to ignore. Humans love religious actions and behaviors, right? Give me a ritual that I'm supposed to do to make the world right, to make my relationships good, to reconcile me to someone. Is there a bird I need to sacrifice? Is there some grain I need to offer and throw on an altar? Do I need to give money to the church? Or maybe I shouldn't eat candy for a month, or I should avoid chocolate for 6 months, or maybe I need to pray 5 times a day. See, we love to do religious actions, religious behaviors in order to reconcile our spiritual life and our interaction with other people. Typically, we're much more quick to do these kinds of things rather than to go and actually interact with another human, the person that we hurt, or the person we sinned against or offended. And Jesus says, forget your religious, spiritual acts. Go and make things right with the person first. In other words, said differently, kind of summarizing what Jesus says here, summarizing, it's better to be reconciled with people than to be engaged in religious ritual. It's better to be reconciled with people than to be engaged in religious ritual. And you will find this teaching all throughout the scriptures and especially in the New Testament. So later, the Apostle Paul, who you might be familiar with, he's one of the authors of a lot of our New Testament scriptures. But in writing to a church in Rome, he makes this little comment in some of his closing remarks. He says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I love this because it's such a realistic exhortation, right? You can tell Paul has a little bit of tread on the tires, when it comes to dealing with people interactions and making amends. He says, if it's possible, because it's not always possible. Sometimes there's distance. Sometimes there's a death. Sometimes there's some sort of just irreconcilable division that would cause harm to actually try to engage with. And then he says, as far as it depends on you. What a strong, powerful thing to say, because you can't control somebody else. Like you can't control their response. You can't control somebody else and whether they apologize or whether they extend forgiveness or not. But what we can do is control ourselves as far as it depends on you. Live at peace with everyone. So I want us to so this is a little bit of the scriptural background. I mean, we could go to verse after verse after verse to kind of find more scriptural background to steps 8 and 9. But trust me, there's plenty more verses out there. What I want us to do is think about practically how we can work through these things. And for these 2 steps, you can kind of break them down into 4 mini steps or 4 phases, all right, as we think through these 2 steps. And those 4 phases to implementing these would look like this. First, it's making a list of names. Then it's owning our part, as Paul says, as far as it depends upon you. Then it's having a willingness to make it right. And then finally, the 4th thing, making the direct amends. All right, so let's work through each of these 4 quickly here this morning. The first thing is list the names. This is what step 8 says. Make a list. This is the second list we've made now as we work through the 12 steps. If you're going to even consider making amends and living at peace with everyone, as far as it's possible, we're going to need to know who it is we're talking about, right? We're going to need a summarized sort of list so we can focus our attention on who it is we're talking about. And some of you are list people, right? I mean, some of you love lists, right? Some of you are the kind of people who, after you do something and then you realize it wasn't on your to-do list, you write it on your to-do list so you can check it off, right? Some of you are like that. I'm a bit like that myself. I like lists, and I know some of you like lists. Lists can be really, really helpful. I don't know if you've ever gone to the grocery store where you've only had 3 or 4 or 5 things to pick up, right? And maybe your spouse says, hey, make sure you get bread and milk and some muffins and some dog food and whatever it is. And so you're like, all right, I got it. I know. And you get to the store, and if you're anything like me, what usually happens is I get to the checkout aisle and I have, instead of having 4 or 5 things, I have about 27 things. And usually I'm on my way home and I realize, or I get home and I realize, oh, I didn't get 2 of the 4 things I went to the store for, but I got all this other stuff, right? Because making a list is actually a really helpful thing to do. So on this step of the journey, they're encouraging us to make a list because a list in this same setting is also very, very helpful. It will help you get all those names that float around in your head that sort of trigger your conscience every now and again. And it will cause you to begin to focus on these names and to begin to think about them and bring them together so it's just not this nebulous group of names or people in your mind. And then you can pray over those names and begin to think over those relationships. And you can begin to do some self-evaluation on the interactions that you had that feel like maybe worth making amends over. Now remember, the natural thing to do when making a list is to make a list of all the people who offended you, right? We've already got that list. Pretty good for most of us, right? We're already thinking, oh, I can't believe Bill did this, and John, when he said that, and my sister Susie, I can't believe she. And it's easy to have a list of names in our head of people who have offended us. But again, remember, these steps are flipping the script from what is normal. We're doing kind of the opposite. Instead of who has offended me, we're being invited to make a list of who we have offended. Just that turning that script is a massive transformational move in the spiritual journey. We made a list, step 8 says, of all the persons we had harmed. And so this is a tough thing to think about. Who have I harmed? Step 8's inviting you to slow down and think deeply about this and make a list. So then the next phase of this 2-step journey, the next phase, the second of 4 that seems all confusing. Anyway, I think you know what I mean. But anyway, the next thing is that we have to own our part. Own our part. Again, something Jesus said here, Matthew chapter 7, he says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your eye." See, Jesus, again, he's an astute observer of human nature. We all want to squeeze out from under the moral microscope and point our fingers at someone else. It's not my fault. It wasn't me. They're the ones they started it. They said it. They're the ones who sent that email. I didn't do it, right? This is the natural way, right? I mean, again, remember, we're being invited to step out of what feels normal and natural and into a transformative process. And Jesus says that step 8 is inviting us, Jesus and step 8 are inviting us to get off this vicious cycle that leads us nowhere. Now, I don't know if you remember in step 2, when we talked about step 2, there's a statement there that no problem, and this is, many people say that Einstein said this, but no problem is solved by the same level of consciousness that created the problem in the first place, right? Our normal dynamics, the normal way of blaming and blame shifting and avoiding and all that, that's the same consciousness that got us into the problem in the first place. And we're being invited to step out of that by taking responsibility for our own actions. You know, and being a pastor now for many years and helping people through relationship challenges, I've learned one thing for sure, that almost every single time I'm interacting with people working through relational challenges, I always realize it takes 2 to tango. And the first comes and tells me their story, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds awful. They're such a jerk. I can't believe they did that. And then the other comes and shares their story, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds awful. They didn't say, that's not what they said when I was talking. This is like a totally different story, like coming from the 2 people and their same interactions. It takes 2 people to tango. And when relationships go sideways, it inevitably, there's a co-mingling, a co-mixture. There's a little bit of accountability for both people. It's actually Pastor Andy Stanley. He used this illustration one time. He's a pastor of a large church in Georgia, and he says when he talks with people, he says, hey, trying to do some conflict resolution. He says, draw a circle, ask an individual, draw a circle, and on that circle, think of it like a pie chart. And on that pie chart, I want you to just, in your own judgment, determine what percentage of this problem, of this relational problem, was actually your part. Like, what is your part of the problem here? And maybe you think it's 1%. If it's 1%, right, just draw the pie chart. If maybe you think it's 10%, or maybe you think it's 25%, or maybe you're like, hey, I'm 50% of the problem here. Whatever your percentage is, it doesn't matter. Just whatever you feel like your percentage is, just draw that chart. And then once that's drawn, he would point to that percentage and say, okay, well, that's the part that's your job to focus on. So, well, it's only 2% of the problem. Well, that's the part that you can do something about, right? This is about owning our own part. What was your own part in this relationship, in this peace, in this struggle, in this difficult situation? And are you willing to own that part? Now next, in the third phase of this process, and we're still in step 8 actually, not ready to jump into step 9, because step 8 encourages us to be willing to make it right. Be willing to make it right. Now this is a challenging and introspective question, and we've been asked a similar question earlier in this journey, but are you actually willing? Is the willingness there? And right now you might be thinking, no, heck no, I'm not willing to make amends. I'm not willing to, it's not even my fault, and they did it first, right? Right, you're getting, I can feel it, that litigator in the back of your head, he's arguing, or she's arguing really strongly with you, defending, keeping you in that natural cycle. And that's fine. I don't encourage you, keep working the step. Keep working the steps. Did you make the list? Did you own your part? Are you becoming willing? There's a lot of wisdom in how this step is even worded here. It says we became willing. Step 8, he says, made a list of all persons we have harmed, and we became willing to make amends to them all. Because those who authored these steps, they know that this can be a process for people. And if you find yourself unwilling to make amends, then it's very likely that in and of itself, very likely, is the place where you have a bit of a spiritual logjam. It's the very place where Jesus wants to engage you and to do some spiritual transformation in your life. So once we've worked through these phases, these first 3 phases that are all in part of step 8, we're now prepared to engage with step 9. Step 9, as a reminder, this is what it says. It says, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Really wisely worded here, but the final step here is make amends. This is a game changer that has the power to set you free in a powerful way. It's just like Jesus who told us, leave your sacrifice at the altar and go sort it out with your friend, with your brother, with your sister. Be reconciled with them. Making amends with someone has enormous power for personal transformation. And instead of being people who hold grudges, who shift the blame, or who point fingers, Jesus is inviting us to be people who are willing to pursue peace by making things right with people. You might ask, well, what do we mean by making amends? What is precisely meant, right? It's interesting how particular sometimes we become when it's surrounding this kind of a thing, right? Well, what exactly are you asking me to do here? Well, in Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, this is how they described making amends. This is what they said: to do something to correct a mistake that one has made or a bad situation that one has caused. To make amends is to do something, right? To do something to remedy, to fix, to heal, to reconcile the situation for which you contributed to. You've caused or contributed to. It's about doing something, right? It's about doing your part to heal the relationship. And as I said earlier, it always takes two to tango, but you can't force the other person to do anything, right? You can't make anybody else say they're sorry. You can't make someone else pay back the money or whatever it might be. You can't make anybody else do anything. All we can do is do our part, make amends with our part. So commenting on this and the sort of the complexity of making amends, Richard Rohr, in his book Breathing Underwater, which again I'd encourage you to read along with us in this book. It's a book about the spirituality of the 12 steps. This is what he says in Breathing Underwater. He says, it might be a note, a call, a visit, a meaningful gift, an invitation, or an outright apology. God will show you the best way, the best place, the best time, and the best words. Wait and pray for them all. You see, we need a lot of wisdom, a lot of faith and love and patience when it comes to making amends. Because there's not really often a cookie cutter path. So I want to encourage you as you sort this out. I want to encourage you as you're thinking and praying about making amends. I want to encourage you to listen to that quiet voice in your soul. Pay attention to it. Pay close attention to it. Don't ignore it and wrestle with it. I encourage you to wrestle with that voice, whatever it's saying to you, until you feel a sense of peace about what it is you need to do. You know, as we just all recently lived through a very intense political season, and like many of you, I've said some political things that some people in my relational world took offense to as I've voiced my opinions on certain matters. And it complicated an already complicated, complex relational dynamic. But as I sat with it, something in me knew I needed to have a face-to-face conversation. It didn't make a lot of sense. I didn't have a big agenda or a big plan. I just felt this deep sense of you need to have a face-to-face conversation with those who were bothered by the things that you said. And so that's what I did. I listened to that voice. Again, I didn't have it all figured out. In some ways it didn't make as much sense, but it felt like that was that soulish part of me, whatever you want to call it, the spirit, the conscience, the Holy Spirit, my own soul, inner voice. I'm not sure. It's always really hard when we think about these things and try to label them, but there was something inside of me that said you should have that conversation. And so I did, and that's what I want to encourage you to do, not to have a conversation specifically, but to listen to that voice inside of you. What is it encouraging you to do? What is it whispering in your ear? Pay close attention to it. So, but sometimes even our best efforts at making amends might actually make things worse, right? Or could lead to more harm than good, which is why step 9 very wisely states and cautions, except when to do so would injure them or others. And it takes a lot of wisdom to know when this is the situation. And again, Richard Rohr says this in his book. He says, just because it is factually true does not mean that everyone can handle it or even needs to handle it or has the right to the information. You need to pray and discern about what the other needs to hear and also has the right to hear. Sometimes that path is tricky, that path towards restoration. And I want to encourage you to listen to that voice, but I want to encourage you also to get counsel, to interact with, to sit with it for a little while, to think deeply about it, especially the harder, the more deep, the more offensive the breach was. You want to step forward with wisdom, and you might need some input and some counsel. But also, it is important to note that sometimes the others who might get injured, because it says it might injure them or others, the others who might get injured also might mean you, right? Especially if you were in a relationship that was abusive in some way, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, physically. Trying to make amends or setting up an interaction with someone who manipulates and controls and abuses can be very dangerous for you. So before you do anything like that, please talk it over with someone you respect. Talk it over with a therapist, with a counselor, with a pastor, a trusted and wise friend. Not the friend who, drinks one too many and just shoots off the hip and says whatever. That friend is fine, and you're fine and they're in your relational world, but maybe not the one to talk to about this specific part of your journey. I want to encourage you, don't do this alone. But in most of our situations, making direct amends to right a wrong that we've caused will mean taking some kind of action, to make a phone call, or send a letter, or an email, or to set up a meeting. It will mean taking responsibility, getting very honest, and spilling your guts to someone that you may have hurt in some way. And I know you're worried about how they're going to respond. What if they don't want to see me? What if they don't accept my apology? What if they get upset with me? I want to encourage you, when you're in this context, you want to lay down your weapons, no more defense, no more justifications, simply take responsibility for your actions and make the apology or make the amends however it needs to be, and allow them to respond however they respond. Because here's what I want you to know today, that it's never wrong to do what you can to set things right with people you've wronged. It's never wrong to do what you can to set things right with people you've wronged. And it's such an important transformational step. These steps invite us to flip the script, to do what goes against our human nature, to stop justifying, to stop excusing, to stop pointing fingers, and to make the list and make amends. Remember what Rebecca, the boss, did with Ted Lasso. She needed to do what she could to come clean and to make amends. And while I really love how Ted Lasso responds, her willingness to make amends is what step 8 and 9 are all about. It's about the person who are making the amends, not about the response of the other person. So are you willing to work through step 8 and 9? I want to encourage you to create your list and take action when ready. Think about that. Pray about that this week. Talk with somebody about it. Make your list and take action when ready to make amends. Because it's never wrong to do what you can to set things right with people you've wronged. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you so much for these few minutes today as we think about these things. And when we think about making amends with people, Lord, it can be a weighty thing. We start to get a little sweaty, our heart rate increases, and a lot of times we just feel really worked up about stepping into that kind of a dynamic. We're worried about the way people are going to respond. We're worried about what will happen if we confess our part, if we take responsibility. So Lord, I pray that you would help us step into this week. For those of us who have amends that need to be made, I pray that you would help us make them. And we know that you'll be with us as we take these steps and that you'll guide us. And ultimately, Lord, we pray that this leads to a healthier and stronger community as a church here, but also a broader community of friendships and relationships here in Lancaster. Guide us in this path, and it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, well, thanks so much for joining with us today. It was a great Sunday. A lot of good news and good things going on here today. Be sure to tune back in next week. We'll be back into this series, working through some of the next steps. Also, we'll hear from Amy a bit more next week. So it's an exciting few weeks here. A lot of things going on. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. Again, you can do that through the digital connection card if you haven't filled that out. But anyhow, we hope you have a great Sunday, a great rest of your Valentine's Day weekend. And until we see you again next time, Godspeed.
Oh, 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 bum, ba, dum, da, oh, 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 people on the streets, hustling all day to go home and feed their families, just trying to make ends meet. They grind it, but they finding that they're still facing defeat. Long live the people that don't feel equal, working hard to pay the wages, others playing in casinos. Long live the ones on the run, hope they find the love they're looking for and purpose they've been running from. Everybody say, oh, 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 na, 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 oh, 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 na, na. Lord, would you open our eyes to the ones that been despised, to the people crying out they don't have a hand to hold at night? And tell them that there's hope in every situation, all this pain I'm facing, for every dream I'm chasing, there's hope. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. There is hope in every situation, all this pain I'm facing, for every generation, there's hope. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. And we all sing, whoa, oh, 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 mama, and so I lift my hands to the God that guides me, to the one that finds me. Even in my darkest days, he walks beside me singing songs of freedom, always singing songs of life. And they're leading me out of the darkness, and they're bringing me into the light. Hey, he never said it would be easy. Nah, he never said we would be safe. He never said the path they're walking on, no, it wouldn't have hurt us to face. But the Lord did promise me freedom. The Lord did promise me strength. He said we'd soar on wings of eagles and not grow weary or faint. Yeah. Oh, 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 oh. Keep it going. 'Cause there's hope in every situation, all this pain I'm facing, for every dream I'm chasing, there's hope. Oh, 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 oh.